The twin suns of Virella burned high in the sky, turning the desert into a sea of golden fire. The wind carried dust like dry smoke, scraping across broken stones and old wreckage from long-forgotten wars. Among the ruins walked a man, a human. His name was Ethan Cole. His steps were heavy, boots cracked from heat and time. He was a scavenger, a traveler, and a man who had seen too many deserts. His ship had crashed 3 weeks ago, and now he searched for metal scraps to trade for fuel. The desert was quiet, too quiet. Only the sound of his breathing, the faint buzz of a small drone following him, and the whisper of sand moving across the ground. Then through the silence something broke, a cry, faint, weak, like a small voice lost beneath the earth. Ethan stopped. His eyes narrowed. He turned off his drone's engine and listened. The wind blew again, soft, dry, endless, and then he heard it once more. A trembling sound like someone crying for help. He walked toward the noise. The sand under his boots shifted as he moved faster. The sound grew louder, a girl's voice, terrified, choking between sobs. Ethan dropped to his knees and brushed away the sand. Beneath it he saw metal bars and a cage buried in the desert. His heart raced. Slave traders often hid their victims like this before returning to collect them. He used his knife to pry open the grate. When he looked inside, he froze. A small alien girl stared back at him, no older than 12. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, her hair pale blue, and her eyes, large, glowing softly with fear and pain. Shackles bound her wrists. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak. "Please, don't hurt me," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "I'm not here to hurt you." He reached down carefully, offering his hand. "I'm human. You're safe now," she hesitated. Then slowly she touched his fingers. Her skin was cold and like water left in shadow. He pulled her out of the hole and set her down gently. She was weak, her legs shaking as she tried to stand. "Who did this to you?" Ethan asked quietly. She looked around the empty desert. "Slavers. They took my village. They said I was worth gold because of my eyes." She shivered. "They said they'd come back tonight." Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced at the sky, the second sun beginning to sink behind distant cliffs. "Then we don't have long." He led her toward an old cargo shelter half buried under sand dunes. Inside, shadows danced under dim red light. Ethan found a bottle of water, handed it to her, and watched her drink with shaking hands. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she said softly. "From the moon colony of Virella Prime." "Lyra," he repeated. "All right, Lyra, I'm Ethan. We'll get you out of here." But before he could say more, his drone beeped. Motion detected. 3 signals approaching fast. He turned off the light and pulled Lyra behind a metal crate. Moments later, voices echoed outside, harsh alien words. The slave traders had returned. "Find the girl," one shouted. "She's worth 10,000 credits." Ethan gripped his pulse pistol. He looked at Lyra, her eyes wide with fear. "Stay down," he whispered. The first trader entered, scanning with a flashlight. Ethan waited until the beam passed, then struck. One quick blow, silent and hard. The alien fell. Another rushed in. Ethan fired once, the sound muffled. The third shouted, raising his blaster, but before he could shoot, Lyra screamed, the sound sharp and full of terror. Ethan used the distraction to tackle the alien. They fell to the ground, wrestling in the dust until Ethan fired again. The desert went quiet once more. Lyra covered her face. Ethan knelt beside her. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe now." Her silver eyes glimmered under the red glow of the setting sun. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "Humans don't come to Virella. They say it's cursed." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm cursed too." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she whispered, "I'll never forget this." Outside, night fell, twin moons rising over the sand. Ethan made a small campfire, the flames reflecting in Lyra's eyes. She sat close, wrapped in a blanket, while he watched the horizon for more danger. "What will you do now?" he asked. "I have no one left," she said. "They burned everything. My mother, my sister." Ethan looked into the fire. "Then you start again. You live, you survive. You make them remember your name." Lyra turned toward him, her voice trembling. "And you? What will you do?" He smiled without looking up. "Same thing I always do. Keep walking until I find something worth staying for." The fire crackled. The desert wind sang softly around them. For a while, neither spoke. The stars began to appear. bright, endless, cold. Finally, Lyra whispered, "Thank you, Ethan." He looked at her, the small girl with silver eyes who had survived the worst of worlds. Something in his heart shifted, a quiet promise forming, one he didn't speak aloud. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow we head for the canyon. There's a spaceport there. Maybe I can find someone who'll help." She nodded, her head resting against her knees, exhaustion taking over. As she drifted to sleep, Ethan looked out into the darkness. Somewhere out there, more slavers would come. But for now, under twin moons and desert winds, one human had done something no one else dared. He had saved an alien child. And in her dreams, the girl whispered the same words over and over. "I'll never forget you, human." 20 long years had passed since that burning day in the desert of Virella, the day a lonely human named Ethan Cole saved a terrified alien child from slave traders. Time had changed everything, except the memory. Ethan now lived far away on Earth in a quiet outpost near the old shipyards of New Houston. His hair had turned gray, his face lined with scars that told stories he never spoke of. He worked fixing engines and transport ships for miners and traders. To them, he was just a tired mechanic with steady hands and silent eyes. But every night, when the city lights dimmed, he would sit by the window of his small home, stare at the stars and wonder, did she survive? Did she remember me? Did that promise still mean anything? The galaxy had grown darker over the years. The news was full of wars between alien empires, corrupt trade houses, and rebellions rising on outer worlds. Ethan didn't care for politics. He had fought in enough wars to know they only brought more graves. But sometimes when he heard the name Queen Lyra of Virella whispered across broadcasts, something deep inside him stirred. The name sounded familiar. The way reporters spoke of her, powerful, wise, but mysterious, made him feel something he couldn't explain. He would turn off the screen before the ache in his chest grew worse. One stormy evening, as thunder rolled across the colony sky, Ethan was fixing an old transport shuttle in the yard. The rain came down in cold sheets, washing away the dust of years. Suddenly, the ground began to shake, a deep vibration that made tools jump and engines hum on their own. He looked up. The clouds split open with blinding golden light. From the heavens descended a massive ship, silent, majestic, unlike any he had ever seen. Its hull shimmered like living metal, glowing with silver veins of energy. Everyone in the yard stopped working. Workers fell to their knees, shielding their eyes. The ship bore the royal insignia of the Virellan Empire. "Impossible," someone whispered. "That's the Queen's flagship." Ethan stood frozen. His heart pounded in his chest. He felt the same strange pull he had felt 20 years ago, the feeling that fate was walking toward him once again. The ship landed gently, its engines releasing a soft humming tone that echoed through the valley. The ramp lowered and armored alien guards stepped out first. Their armor gleamed silver and their faces were hidden behind glowing visors. Behind them came her, a tall, graceful figure dressed in flowing white robes that glowed faintly under the stormlight. Her hair shimmered pale blue, and her skin reflected the light like moonlit water. When she looked around, every soldier bowed their head. Then her eyes found him. Ethan didn't move. He couldn't. The woman walked straight toward him. Rain fell harder, but it slid off her robes without leaving a mark. Her glowing eyes, the same color he remembered, looked into his. For a moment, neither spoke. The world seemed to fade. Then she smiled softly and said in a calm, almost trembling voice, "Ethan Cole, I finally found you," the workers whispered in shock. She knows his name? Ethan blinked, unsure what he was hearing. "I think you've made a mistake, Your Majesty," he said slowly. "I'm just a mechanic." The Queen stepped closer. "You once pulled me from the sands of death," she said. "I was a child. My name was Lyra." The words hit him like a thunderclap. His breath caught. The little girl from the desert, the one with silver eyes and was standing before him, now grown, now a queen. Lyra took a deep breath. "For 20 years I searched the stars for you. You saved me when no one else would. Now I have come to repay that debt." Ethan looked around. Every worker was staring, every soldier watching. He shook his head, half in disbelief. "Repay me? I didn't do it for a reward." Her eyes softened. "I know," she said. "That's why it matters." The rain stopped. The air was still, filled with quiet tension. Lyra turned to her guards. "Prepare the ship. We leave soon." One of the soldiers stepped forward nervously. "Your Majesty, with respect, this is a human colony." "Are you sure?" She raised her hand. "He comes with me." Ethan frowned. "Hold on. I can't just—" But she interrupted gently, her voice full of command yet trembling with emotion. "Please, Ethan. I want to show you what became of that little girl you saved. You deserve to see what your kindness built." The way she said it, he couldn't refuse. Something in her tone carried both strength and sadness, the sound of someone who had waited too long. He sighed and looked at the glowing ship. "All right," he said quietly, "but only for a short trip." She smiled, the same small, thankful smile she once gave under the twin moons of Varela. As they walked up the ramp, the crowd watched in awe. The human who once lived in silence was now stepping aboard a royal ship under the gaze of an alien queen. The engines roared to life. Golden light flooded the sky. From his window seat, Ethan looked down as Earth grew smaller, turning into a pale blue sphere against the black void. Lyra sat beside him, hands folded in her lap. After a long silence, she whispered, "You saved me once, Ethan. But now, I must ask you to save something much greater." He turned toward her, confused. "What do you mean?" She looked out the window, her reflection glowing faintly against the stars. "My people," she said softly. "They're tearing themselves apart. The same slavers who hunted me now control half the empire. I need someone I can trust. Someone who doesn't want a throne." Ethan stared at her, the old fire slowly awakening in his chest. And for the first time in 20 years, he didn't feel alone anymore. The royal flagship drifted through the endless dark of space, a silver giant moving like a silent moon. Stars reflected on its smooth hull, and from its windows entire galaxies shimmered like rivers of light. Ethan Cole sat quietly inside the observation deck, hands folded, eyes lost in the view. It had been years since he'd left Earth, and yet here he was, flying beside the alien girl he once saved, now a queen of worlds. Queen Lyra stood near the window, her reflection glowing faintly in the glass. She didn't wear a crown. Her robe flowed like liquid silver, the same color as her skin. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The hum of the ship filled the silence, soft, steady, endless. Finally, Ethan broke it. "So this is what became of you," he said quietly. "A queen among the stars." She turned slightly, a faint smile on her lips. "And you are still the same man who gave a stranger water in a desert," he chuckled dryly. "You've got a long memory." Lyra looked at him with gentle eyes. "You told me never to forget who I was. I didn't. Every law I made, every city I rebuilt, I did it with your voice in my memory. The human who saved a child when he had nothing to gain." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "You've built an empire, Lyra. You don't need to thank me." She looked away, her voice quiet. "It's not thanks I came for, Ethan, it's help." The ship entered the orbit of Varela Prime, the heart of her empire. From above, the planet glowed blue and gold, oceans surrounded by crystal continents. As they descended, Ethan saw floating cities, tall spires of glass, and great silver domes that touched the clouds. It was beautiful but strange. Too perfect, too still. When the ship landed at the royal port, the sound of thousands of voices filled the air. Trumpets echoed, banners shimmered, and soldiers stood in formation, their armor reflecting sunlight. The moment Lyra stepped out, the entire crowd bowed. But when Ethan followed her down the ramp, silence swept across the field. A human, standing beside their queen. Eyes widened, whispers spread. Some faces showed curiosity, others disgust. Ethan could feel the tension like cold wind. Lyra ignored it all. She walked proudly, her hand resting lightly near her heart. "He is my guest," she said aloud, her voice ringing through the air. "Show him the honor due to one who saved your queen's life." The crowd bowed again, though not everyone looked pleased. Inside the palace, Ethan saw halls of crystal and light where the walls shimmered like moving water. Strange music floated through the corridors, alien, haunting, beautiful. Servants bowed as Lyra passed, but not everyone welcomed him. When they reached the throne chamber, a group of alien ministers waited. Tall, elegant beings with silver robes and narrow, glowing eyes. One of them, an older male named Counselor Varen, stepped forward. Your Majesty, he said coldly, this is highly irregular. Bringing a human into the royal halls? Into your presence? Lyra's expression didn't change. This human has earned that right. Varen's voice grew sharper. He is a relic from a primitive world. What could such a creature offer the throne of Virella? Ethan stood still, his jaw tight. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Lyra stepped closer to her counselor. What he offered, she said, her tone soft but sharp as glass, was mercy. Something even our kind forgot long ago. The chamber fell silent. Varen lowered his head but not his pride. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I only seek to protect you from those who would use such sentiment against you. Lyra turned away. Then protect the people from greed first. Ethan watched her, realizing she carried more than power. She carried weight. Every word cost her something. Later that night, Lyra led Ethan to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The lights below glowed like stars beneath their feet. I built all this, she said softly. But I can't trust those who serve me. They hide behind loyalty but chase power in secret. Ethan leaned on the railing. You've got enemies close then? Yes. Her voice trembled slightly. And I fear they will strike soon. They think I've grown weak. Sentimental. She looked at him. They're wrong. But still, I can't fight them alone. Ethan frowned. Why me, Lyra? I'm no soldier anymore, she smiled faintly. Because you see what others don't. You looked at a frightened child and saw life, not value. My council sees only numbers, not hearts. I need someone who still understands right from wrong. For a moment, Ethan didn't reply. The stars above them burned quietly. Then he nodded. All right. I'll help, but I don't take orders. Her eyes brightened, not with command, but relief. You never did. They both laughed softly. The sound lost in the wind. But deep inside the palace, in the dark chamber below the throne, Counselor Varen spoke to a shadowed figure through a shimmering communicator. He has returned, Varen whispered. The human she once spoke of. He stands beside her now. The voice on the other end hissed softly. Then the prophecy is true. The queen's heart belongs to a human. Varen's tone hardened. Shall I remove him? The voice replied low and cold. Not yet. Let him feel safe first. Then when she trusts him most, we strike both together. Back on the balcony, Lyra turned to Ethan, her face half lit by moonlight. Tomorrow I will show you what my people truly are. Not the glory. The truth. Ethan met her gaze. I'll be ready. But as he looked into her glowing eyes, he felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. The weight of destiny returning. Somewhere deep down. He knew. Saving her once was only the beginning. The next morning began with golden light spilling through the palace halls. The city below shimmered under twin suns, its crystal towers rising like frozen fire. The sound of alien birds echoed through the air, soft, distant, haunting. Ethan Cole stood on the balcony of his guest chamber, watching the world wake up. Virella Prime was unlike any planet he had seen, too clean, too perfect, too quiet. It was the kind of silence that came from fear, not peace. He had been here less than a day, but already he could feel eyes following him everywhere. Guards stood at every door. Servants bowed, but their gazes were sharp. He wasn't welcome here, he was being watched. A chime echoed through the chamber. The door opened and Queen Lyra entered, dressed in white armor that gleamed like glass. Her hair glowed faint blue, and when she smiled, it was gentle but tired. Good morning, Ethan, she said softly. Did you rest? He nodded. As much as a man can, knowing half your guards want him gone. She gave a faint, knowing smile. They fear what they don't understand, my people. They have forgotten what humans truly are. He raised an eyebrow. And what's that supposed to mean? Lyra walked to the window, looking out at the bright horizon. Humans are dangerous, not because of strength or weapons, but because of their hearts. You feel too deeply. You forgive too easily. That's something my council has tried to erase from me for years. Ethan folded his arms. You're the queen. Can't you just order them to behave? Her smile faded. A queen commands loyalty, Ethan, but fear hides inside loyalty. I rule with power, yes, but power built on old blood. My advisors, the council, they remember the war that made me queen. They think kindness is weakness. Later that day, Lyra led him through the palace corridors. Every wall shimmered with silver light, every step echoing softly on marble floors. She showed him statues of kings and queens long dead, faces carved with pride and cruelty. When they reached the council chamber, Ethan noticed how different it felt. The air was colder here. 7 alien figures sat around a round table made of black glass. Their robes flowed like smoke, their eyes glowing faintly blue. Among them was Counselor Varen, the one who had questioned Lyra before. "Your Majesty," Varen said smoothly, "you honor us with your presence." His gaze shifted toward Ethan. "And you bring—"
"The human." Lyra stood tall. "He is here as my advisor." Varen's lips curled slightly. "Advisor? On what matters, Your Majesty? Scrap metal? Desert survival?" Ethan met his gaze calmly. "On what it means to have a conscience," he said. The room fell silent. Lyra didn't hide her smile. "You may find, Counselor, that the simplest voices speak the clearest truths." The meeting continued, but Ethan listened more than he spoke. He heard words about trade routes, rebellions, and laws. Yet hidden beneath the formality, he sensed rot. Deals made in secret, decisions meant to keep power in the council's hands, not the people's. When the meeting ended, Varen walked close to Ethan, pretending to be friendly. "You are bold for a man so small," he said quietly. "Be careful how loudly you speak. Even mercy can be dangerous in this palace." Ethan didn't flinch. So can pride. Varen's smile faded. He turned and left. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He walked the empty halls alone. The palace felt like a giant heart made of glass, beating but hollow inside. He stopped near a window and looked out across the city. Down below, he saw something that made his breath catch. In the lower district, far from the shining towers, he saw shadows, rows of small figures, working under bright lights, chained together. Children, alien children, slaves. He clenched his fists. "Lyra said slavery was gone," he whispered. Footsteps sounded behind him. Lyra stood there wearing a long, dark cloak. She followed his gaze, her expression heavy. "I know," she said softly. "The council hides them. They call it labor for debt. It is the same thing, only given a new name." Ethan turned to her. "Then why let them live like that? You're the queen." Her voice broke. "Because if I defy the council without proof, the empire will break apart. I've already ended one civil war. I cannot start another." He took a step closer. "You can't save everyone if you're afraid to save anyone." She looked at him, pain flickering in her eyes. "You sound just like the man who pulled me from the sand." Ethan sighed. Then maybe that man still knows what's right. The next morning, a whisper spread through the palace. The Queen's human has entered the lower city. Ethan had gone down before dawn, disguised in a worker's cloak. He moved through narrow streets filled with smoke and silence, past broken walls and dim lights. The workers there looked tired, hollow-eyed, forgotten. He spoke to them. They told him stories. How the council demanded more production, how families disappeared when they complained. He saw the truth with his own eyes. When he returned, Lyra was waiting. "Do you see now why I asked for your help?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah," he said. "But I also saw something else." Her brows furrowed. "What?" He looked straight at her. "Your people still believe in you. They just don't see you anymore. They see your counsel. They see fear." Lyra's voice shook slightly. "Then tell me, Ethan, what should I do?" He stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "Show them who you were. The girl who defied slavers, not the queen who hides behind laws. They'll follow her." For a moment, Lyra said nothing. Then slowly she nodded. "Then that is what I'll become again." But deep in the palace, Counselor Varen watched through a hidden screen. His eyes glowed coldly. "The human corrupts her," he hissed. "He must be removed." A shadow behind him spoke. "Shall I kill him?" Varen's smile returned. "No, not yet. Let the queen watch him die. That will break her completely." As the night fell again over Varela Prime, Ethan didn't know that his every step was being watched,
and that the next time he reached out to help it might cost him his life. Night had fallen on Varela Prime, and the royal palace gleamed under the twin moons like a jewel in the dark. The wind carried soft chimes through the garden, and the air smelled of crystal rain. It should have been peaceful. But inside the palace, whispers had replaced music and eyes followed every shadow. Ethan Cole felt the tension the moment he stepped into the main hall. Guards stood at every corner, silent and stiff. Their faces were hidden behind masks. The servants moved quietly, afraid to make noise. Something was wrong. He could feel it. He was supposed to attend a grand ceremony that night, a celebration marking 20 years since Queen Lyra's rise to power. Every noble, general, and council member in the empire was present. But Ethan knew this wasn't just a party. The air felt heavy with intent. He walked beside Lyra as they entered the Hall of Stars, a massive chamber lined with glass walls showing the galaxy beyond. Light from distant suns shimmered across the marble floor. Music played softly, but even that felt strained. Lyra looked radiant in her silver gown, but her smile was forced. "Keep your eyes open tonight," she whispered. "Varen has been too quiet." Ethan nodded. Quiet men cause the loudest trouble. The crowd cheered as Lyra stepped onto the platform. She raised her hand gracefully, and the music stopped. "My people," she said, her voice echoing across the hall. 20 years ago, our world was broken by greed and war. But from that darkness, we rose together. No race, no planet, no child should live in chains again. That is the promise of Varela. Her words were noble, her tone powerful. But Ethan noticed something strange. Behind the applause, behind the bright smiles, a few faces remained still, watching, calculating. Counselor Varen stood near the front, bowing slightly, his lips curved into a polite smile. But his eyes were cold, reflecting no light. Ethan's instincts screamed a warning. He shifted closer to Lyra, scanning the balconies above. Something glittered there. A faint flash, like light on metal. He didn't think. He just moved. The sound came a second later. A sharp crack, a burst of blue light, a plasma shot cutting through the air straight toward the queen. Ethan lunged, knocking her aside. The blast grazed his shoulder and tore through his jacket, searing flesh. He fell to one knee, teeth clenched in pain. The guards shouted, the crowd screamed, the music stopped instantly. "Find the shooter," Lyra commanded. Her voice shook, not from fear, but rage. Ethan forced himself up, clutching his burned arm. "They were on the upper balcony," he began, but the guards were already running. Smoke filled the air. Lyra turned to him, eyes wide with worry. "You're hurt," he waved her off. "It's nothing. I've had worse." But when she saw the blood staining his sleeve, she stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached for him. "You saved me again," she whispered. He tried to smile. Old habit. Later, the palace was sealed under lockdown. The shooter had escaped, but the attack had failed. The council gathered in emergency session, demanding explanations. "This is unacceptable," shouted Varen. "To think someone could breach the queen's protection. Perhaps her human advisor knows something." Ethan glared at him. "You're welcome to check the burn on my arm if you think I'm part of it." Varen smirked. "Pain makes a good disguise." Lyra stood, her voice calm but deadly. "Enough. Ethan saved my life. While others debated, he acted." Varen bowed slightly, but his tone dripped venom. "Of course, Your Majesty. Forgive my concern." She turned to Ethan. "Go rest, that's an order." He started to protest, but one look at her face and the mix of fear and anger silenced him. He nodded and left the chamber. In the quiet of his quarters, Ethan cleaned his wound and stared out the window. The stars blinked coldly, distant and uncaring. His reflection in the glass looked tired, older than he remembered. He didn't hear the door open. Lyra entered silently, still wearing her gown, her crown gone. She moved closer, her steps soft. "You should be resting," he said without turning. "So should you,"
she replied gently. He chuckled weakly. Guess neither of us are good at listening. She reached out, her hand brushing his arm. The pain eased slightly beneath her touch. Her skin glowed faintly, her power calming his nerves. You could have died, she said softly. You've already saved me once. Why risk it again? He looked at her, really looked. Because you're still the same girl I pulled from that pit, Lyra. And I don't like seeing good people get buried again. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt charged, not just with emotion, but with something older, deeper. You don't belong here, she whispered. This world will eat you alive. He smiled faintly. Then it'll have to chew hard. Lyra laughed quietly, a real laugh, the first in days. But then her expression softened. I don't want to lose you, Ethan. He hesitated. You won't. Outside the door, unseen by either of them, a small drone hovered in the corner. Its single red eye blinked silently, recording everything. In a distant chamber, Counselor Varen watched the live feed with a cold smile. Perfect, he murmured. The Queen's attachment to him grows. When we strike again, she will not think clearly. Her heart will destroy her. A shadowed figure behind him whispered, And the human? Varen's smile deepened. He'll be the blade we use to end her reign. Back in the quiet of the room, Lyra sat beside Ethan as the stars drifted slowly past the window. The wound on his arm glowed faintly as her healing light worked through the skin. Ethan watched her in silence, realizing the truth. The queen who ruled an empire carried the same heart as the frightened girl he'd once held in his arms. And though neither said it aloud, they both knew something had changed. The shadows around them were growing darker. But in that darkness, one human light still refused to fade. The palace slept under twin moons, but Ethan Cole did not. He sat by the window, his arm still wrapped in bandages that faintly glowed where Queen Lyra had healed him. The burn no longer hurt, but his chest did, not from pain but from something heavier. He could not forget the sound of the plasma shot, or the way she had looked at him afterward. Fear, relief, something else she hadn't said. Outside, the city lights flickered like dying stars. Inside, silence filled the room. The door slid open quietly. Lyra entered, dressed not in royal robes but in a simple black cloak. No crown, no guards, just her. You should be resting, Ethan said, his voice low. So should you, she replied softly, echoing his own words from the night before. He smiled faintly. You're the queen. People will panic if they see you sneaking into a human's room at midnight. She didn't smile back. Instead, she walked closer, her eyes glowing faintly blue in the dark. Let them panic, she said. For once, I need to speak as Lyra, not as a queen. Ethan stood slowly. Then speak. They walked out to the upper balcony where the wind was cool and sharp. The stars stretched forever, and the moons reflected across the crystal towers of Varela Prime. From up there, the Empire looked perfect, but Lyra's face told another story. When I became queen, she began, they said I brought peace, but they never saw what it cost. Ethan stayed quiet. My mother died in chains, she said softly. My sister too. I was a child when you found me. I remember your hand reaching through the sand. That moment never left me. Every law I passed, every world I conquered, every treaty I signed, all of it came from that one promise. Ethan frowned. Promise? She turned toward him, her silver hair moving with the wind. I promised I'd build a world where no child would ever cry the way I did in that pit. And I kept that promise. But to do it, I became what I hated, a ruler who must choose which lives to save and which to sacrifice. He looked at her quietly. You're saying you built peace out of pain? Lyra nodded. I ended slavery. I united planets. But the council, she stopped, voice trembling. They twisted my vision. They turned compassion into policy, mercy into weakness. They say I rule with love. But behind my throne, they trade lives for profit. Ethan leaned on the railing. So the girl who swore to protect others is now trapped in her own empire. Her eyes met his. That's why I came for you, Ethan. Not to thank you and to remember who I was before I became this. A long silence followed. The wind moved softly through the balcony, carrying the sound of the city below. Distant songs, quiet laughter, life continuing, unaware of the war inside their queen's heart. Ethan spoke finally. "You can still fix this," she shook her head. "You don't understand. The council controls everything, trade, armies, media. If I move too openly, they'll destroy the balance. Billions could die. Then don't move openly," he said. "Move like you did when you were that girl in the sand, quiet, smart, unseen." Her lips parted slightly in surprise. "You sound like a soldier again." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I never stopped being one." She stepped closer then, too close. "You always speak like you carry the galaxy on your back, Ethan. Why?" He didn't answer right away. The question was too old, too deep. "Because someone has to," he said finally. "When everyone runs, someone has to stand." Lyra's eyes softened. "That's why I never forgot you." For a moment, the air between them stilled. The queen and the human, two souls who should never have met, standing under the same stars that had once separated them. Ethan looked at her, voice quieter now. "Lyra, if all this started with a promise, then keep it. Don't let them bury what makes you different." She smiled sadly. "And what if they kill me for it?" He met her gaze steadily. "Then you won't face it alone." Before she could reply, a sharp sound broke the night. A distant explosion, faint but unmistakable. The city's lights flickered. Alarms began to echo across the towers. Lyra turned sharply. "The Eastern District, that's the worker sector." They ran inside where guards were already shouting orders. A holographic map appeared, red warning signs flashing over one of the industrial zones. "Sabotage," a guard said. "Unknown attackers breached the lower shield wall." Lyra's voice turned hard. "Evacuate the civilians. Send my royal guard." Baron appeared on the hollow screen, his tone smooth as always. "Your Majesty, the Council advises against direct action. It could risk your safety." "Allow us to handle it," Ethan stepped forward. "He's lying. This is their doing. They're using the chaos to frame someone." Baron's eyes narrowed. "Ah, the human advisor speaks again. Careful, Earthman. Your place is beside the Queen, not above her." Lyra's eyes flared. "Enough. I will handle this myself." Before anyone could stop her, she turned and strode toward the landing platform. Ethan followed, ignoring the protests of guards. Minutes later, the royal ship sliced through the night sky, heading toward the burning district. From above, Ethan saw the fires spreading through the lower towers, the very place he'd seen slaves working in secret. Lyra gripped the controls herself, her eyes focused, her jaw tight. "They wanted to hide the truth," she said through clenched teeth. "Now the whole world will see it." Ethan looked at her, the glow of fire reflecting in her eyes. "Then let them see their queen fight for them." She turned to him, voice steady but full of emotion. "No, Ethan. Let them see the human who reminded her why she must." As the ship descended into the fire-lit chaos, alarms wailed across the city. Lyra's empire was trembling. But for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid because beside her stood the man who once saved her life, and together they were about to save her world. The night sky above Varela Prime was on fire. From the royal ship's glass canopy, Ethan Cole saw flames rising from the lower towers, red and gold streaking across the crystal city. Sirens howled. Civilians ran through glowing streets as drones swarmed overhead like silver wasps. The once perfect empire was unraveling under its own light. Beside him, Queen Lyra gripped the controls of the ship. Her silver eyes reflected both fire and fury. "They've started it," she said quietly. "The Council. This is their rebellion." Ethan strapped in beside her. "Then let's end it." The ship descended, engines screaming as it cut through smoke and chaos. Below, the worker district burned, but not from rebels. The explosions came from inside the factories, precise and planned. Lyra knew the truth now. This was no attack from outside. This was a message. They landed on a wide platform near the center tower. The air was thick with ash and fear. Alien civilians gathered in clusters, children crying, guards shouting orders with confusion. Lyra stepped out first, her cloak whipping in the heat. When people saw her, their queen walking through smoke, they fell silent. She raised her voice, strong and clear. "My people, you have been lied to. The fire you see was not born from your anger, but from your master's greed. They tried to silence your pain. They tried to burn your truth. But I am here, and I will not run." Her voice echoed through the ruined streets. Faces lifted. Eyes widened. For the first time in years, her people saw not a ruler in glass towers, but the girl who had once lived in chains. Ethan watched from the side, his hand on his pistol. He could feel movement in the shadows. Soldiers approaching. Not hers, then he saw him. Counselor Varen, surrounded by armored guards, emerging from the smoke like a ghost. "Brave words, Your Majesty," Varen said, his tone cold. "But the people deserve truth, don't they?" He turned, pointing toward Ethan. "Tell them, Queen. Tell them who this human really is. A relic of war, a spy sent to corrupt our world." Gasps filled the air. The guards raised their weapons. Ethan took a slow breath. "You talk too much," he said calmly. Lyra stepped in front of him. "Enough, Varen. You've poisoned this empire long enough." He laughed softly. "Poisoned? No, my queen. I've protected it. From you. You brought human weakness into our blood. But I will fix that mistake tonight." He raised his hand. Fire. The world exploded in light. Blasters cracked. Guards screamed. Ethan grabbed Lyra, diving behind a fallen column as plasma bolts ripped through the air. He returned fire, precise and fast. Years of combat training came back like instinct. 3 shots, 3 guards down, stay low, he shouted. Lyra extended her hand. Her eyes flared silver. The ground itself rippled with energy, a shimmering pulse that threw attackers backward. The air burned with power. She was no longer just a queen, she was a storm. Varen stumbled but didn't retreat. "You've lost control, Lyra." "Look at you, fighting beside a human." Ethan stepped out, smoke curling around him. "That human just saved your queen twice. You should have picked a better enemy," he fired. The bolt hit Varen's shoulder, spinning him to the ground. The remaining guards froze, uncertain. Lyra walked toward him slowly, her voice shaking with emotion. "You used fear to rule them. You used my pain to build your power. That ends now." She reached out her hand, light formed between her fingers, pure and blinding. "Mercy is not weakness," she said. "It's what makes us more than you." Varen tried to speak, but the light consumed his words. When it faded, he was gone, vanished into dust and silence. For a long moment, no one moved. The firelight flickered on the ruins. Then someone in the crowd whispered, "Long live the Queen." Another voice joined. Then another. Soon the chant rose through the burning city, echoing across towers and bridges. "Long live the Queen. Long live the human." Lyra turned to Ethan, her breath shaking. "They saw it," she whispered. "They finally saw it," he smiled faintly. "Yeah, you showed them who you are." Hours later, when the fires were gone and the city was calm again, the palace lights shone brighter than ever before. But inside the throne chamber, Lyra stood quietly by the window, her crown resting on the table beside her. Ethan approached, his jacket torn and face streaked with dust. "You should be resting," he said softly. She turned, smiling gently. "So should you," he chuckled. "We keep saying that." Lyra stepped closer. "You once told me to remember who I was." "Tonight I did," he nodded. "And you reminded me what humans can still mean to the stars." She hesitated. "The people want you to stay. They call you the keeper of the promise." He looked away toward the stars. "I'm no hero, Lyra, just a man who made a choice." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then stay and keep making them with me." Ethan turned back. Her eyes glowed faintly, soft and warm. In that moment, the noise of the world faded. He reached out, touching her hand. "I'll stay for now, until they learn what mercy really means." She smiled, the same smile she gave him 20 years ago in a desert of sand and blood. As dawn rose over Varela Prime, golden light filled the sky. The Queen stood beside the human who had once saved her life. Together they watched the city rebuild, not as ruler and subjecting, but as 2 souls bound by a promise made under twin moons. The galaxy would remember them, not for crowns or battles, but for a truth older than any empire. That one act of kindness can change the fate of worlds. And in that light, Lyra whispered softly, "Never forgotten, Ethan." He smiled, eyes on the horizon. "Never alone, Lyra.